The turn onto that road was a mistake, and it nearly cost him the only two people he could not afford to lose. Bruce didn't know that yet. He knew only that the map had betrayed him, that the highway had narrowed to a cracked desert, two-lane with mountains shimmering in the far heat, and that his wife had gone quiet in the passenger seat, the way she did when something felt wrong before she could name it. In the back, their little girl slept against the window, and half a mile ahead, strung across both lanes in the late gold light, 7 motorcycles were waiting, and the men beside them were already watching the car come. To understand what those 7 men were and why nobody on that road would help, you have to know what the locals knew, which was to never ever drive this stretch when the gang was out on it. They owned it, not on paper, in the way fear owns a thing. For 6 years the same crew had run that empty highway as their own private country, stopping cars when they felt like it, taking what they wanted, teaching anyone who didn't stop what happened to people who didn't stop. The sheriff's office was 90 minutes away and had learned to be slow. Drivers who knew the road had a rule: if you see the bikes, you do not slow, you do not make eye contact, and you pray they are not in the mood. Bruce, a stranger following a circled wrong turn on a folded map, had come around the bend too late to do any of it. Stay with this, because everything that made the next few minutes so dangerous came down to one thing: the 2 people behind the glass, and the fact that he could not run without leaving one of them behind. He slowed. There was no choice. The bikes blocked the road, and the moment the car stopped, the 7 drifted off their machines and came for it, unhurried, spreading as they came, the loose, confident fan of men who have done this 100 times and never once had it go wrong. Bruce got out before they reached the doors, deliberately, stepping away from the car, drawing their eyes onto himself and off the windows, putting his body between the gang and his family without ever making it look like that was what he was doing. "We don't want any trouble," he said. "We took a wrong turn. Let us through and you'll never see us again." The leader came to the front of the pack, a big man, grey in the beard, a leather vest over a chest like a barrel, moving with the ease of someone who hadn't been genuinely challenged in years. He looked past Bruce at the car, at the woman rigid in the front seat, at the small shape stirring in the back, and he smiled, and the smile was the worst thing on that road. "Wrong turn," he agreed pleasantly. "That's usually how it goes." A younger rider circled to the passenger side and put his face close to the glass, grinning in at the woman, and Bruce moved 1 step sideways, cutting the angle, pulling the man's attention back onto himself. It worked. The rider drifted off the window and back into the fan of men, and now all 7 of them were facing Bruce, and the car was behind him, and that was exactly how he wanted it. "Keys," the leader said, "on the ground, then we'll talk about the rest." "Take the car," Bruce said. "Take whatever's in it. Let my family walk up the road and it's yours." "See, that's the part people never understand," the leader said softly. "It was never about the car." He spread his hands to the empty miles. "It's about everybody who drives through here knowing what happens. You're the lesson today. Can't have the lesson just drive off." That answer told Bruce there was nothing left to buy his way out with, and stay with this, because it is the moment the whole thing turned from a robbery into something a man has to be ready to end. He didn't let it show. He kept his hands loose at his sides, his shoulders low, his voice level, and he did the one thing that costs a surrounded man the most, which is to not give them the fear they were feeding on. And 100 yards back down the road, from behind a pickup that had broken down on the shoulder, an hour before any of this, a man named Earl Hodge crouched with a clear view of all of it and did not move. Earl was a route driver, stranded with a dead alternator, and he'd driven this highway long enough to know exactly whose bikes those were. He knew the rule: keep your head down, wait, and hope they finish before they notice you and make you part of it. So he stayed low behind his truck, heart going, watching a small man in a green shirt stand alone inside a ring of 7 with a woman and a child in the car behind him. And he did the math everyone did on that road, and the math said the small man was finished. It escalated the way these things do, one ugly step at a time. One rider walked his bike forward and laid it across the road behind the car, boxing it in. Then a second did the same on the far side. The desert stretched flat and coverless for miles. There was nowhere to run that didn't mean leaving someone. In the back seat, the little girl was fully awake now and understood, in the wordless way children do, that something was very wrong, and she began to cry, and her mother reached back to hold her hand and told her low to be brave, that Daddy was right there. A rider by the hood heard the crying and slammed his palm flat against the windshield, hard, right over the child's face, and laughed when she screamed and shrank away. Something moved in Bruce's eyes then, just once, and was gone. Behind his truck, Earl saw the small man's head turn a few degrees toward the car, and then back, and he saw the shoulders that had stayed so low finally settle into something else. Not fear, Earl would say later, the opposite of fear, a kind of terrible readiness, and Earl felt his own stomach drop, because he had seen frightened men his whole life, and this was not that. "Tell your kid to shut up," the leader said. "She's a child," Bruce said. "She's scared. You did that." "On your knees," the leader said. "Done playing now, stepping in close. Right here, where everybody can see it. That's how this ends." And he reached out and put his heavy hand flat on Bruce's shoulder and pressed down, waiting for the man to fold the way they always folded. 8 seconds. That was all it was going to take. And every one of them was still smiling when it began. Bruce didn't fold. That was the first thing that went wrong for them. The hand pressed down and met a man who simply would not go down, and in the half-second the leader's grip tightened out of pure instinct. Bruce's hand came up, caught the thick wrist and turned it hard against the joint. The leader's arm rotated before his mind could argue, his balance broke, and 400 pounds of man and leather went face first into the asphalt with the air punched out of him. 1 second. The rider with his palm still on the windshield spun off the glass and lunged, and Bruce was already there, a flat palm driving into his chest that folded him backward into the man beside him, both of them tangling down in a heap of legs. 2 seconds. A third came in swinging a length of chain, the metal singing. Bruce stepped inside the arc before it could land and put an elbow into his ribs, and the chain hit the road a half-beat before the man holding it did. 3 seconds. The fourth tried to take his legs, dropping low for the tackle, and ran his own shoulder straight into Bruce's rising knee, the impact stopping him like a wall. 4 seconds. The fifth got a single clean strike to the jaw, and his legs simply stopped belonging to him. He sat down in the road and stayed there. 5 seconds. The sixth looked at 5 of his brothers scattered across the asphalt in the time it takes to draw a breath, and turned and ran for his bike, and was never touched and never touched anyone. 6 seconds. The seventh, the youngest, the one who had said nothing this whole time, never moved at all, frozen by his machine with his hands open at his sides. 8 seconds, and the wind was the loudest thing on the road. From behind his truck, Earl Hodge would swear for the rest of his life that he never actually saw the middle of it. "I saw them standing," he told people afterward, "more than once, always the same. Then I saw them down. The part in between, I've tried to put in order 100 times and I can't. It didn't happen in seconds like normal seconds happen." The leader pushed himself up on one arm, blood on his lip, and stared at the small man standing calm and unmarked in the middle of the wreckage of his crew, and for the first time in 6 years, the most dangerous man on that road did not know what he was looking at. Bruce did not press it. He stepped back toward the car, keeping every one of them in his vision, and he opened the driver's door and said quietly to the woman and the crying child that it was over, that they were leaving, that they should keep their eyes on him and not on the men. And here is where it did not end the way the leader wanted it to end, and stay with this, because it is the part that undid him completely. One of the downed riders, the one who'd taken the elbow, got to his knees, still game, still furious, and stopped, because he was looking at Bruce's face now instead of his hands, and something was arriving behind his eyes. "Wait," he said slowly. "I know him. I know that face." He pointed, almost accusing. "That's from the pictures. The fighter. That's Bruce Lee." The name dropped into the middle of that road, like something falling from a great height, and for a moment not one of them said anything. The leader looked from the rider's face to Bruce's, searching for a reason it wasn't true, and didn't find one, because it explained everything. The wrist, the elbow, the single strike that had ended a grown man in under a second, all of it trained into that small frame over a lifetime, the same patient way these men had trained their hands around a throttle. "Doesn't change what happened," Bruce said. "It just means you know why." The leader got the rest of the way to his feet, slow, wiping his mouth, his eyes never leaving Bruce, and his hand drifted toward his belt, and then, thinking better of it, dropped empty to his side. When he finally spoke, his voice did not carry the way it had 5 minutes ago. 6 years of never once needing to raise it, and now it came out thin. He looked at his scattered men, at the boxed-in car, at the small unmarked man standing between him and a woman and a little girl, and he made the only decision left to a man who has just learned exactly where he ranks. "Get in your car," he said. "Take your family. Go." Nobody blocked the road this time. The ones who could stand stepped aside without being told. The ones who couldn't watched from the ground. Bruce got the child settled, and his wife's hand found his arm and gripped it hard, and he eased the car forward past the fallen chain and the dropped bikes and the men who owned this road and did not anymore own it the same way. In the mirror, the 7 of them shrank against the desert until the bend took them, and then there was nothing behind the car but empty highway and heat coming up off the asphalt in waves. Earl Hodge waited until the car was long gone and the bikes had ridden off the other way before he came out from behind his truck, hands shaking worse than they had over the dead alternator. He got a tow into the next town and told the story to a mechanic, then a waitress, then anyone who would sit still, and it went out from there the way these things do. People who drove that stretch afterward said the gang still rode it, but something had gone out of them. The leader who used to make people kneel never asked anyone to kneel again, and never quite raised his voice again either, and nobody could say why. Only 7 men on that road ever knew. The little girl cried a while, and then, the way children do, stopped, and by the time the gas station lights of the next town came up purple against the dusk, she was asking if they could get something cold to drink. Bruce pulled in under the single light with the moths turning around it and shut off the engine, and none of them moved. His wife put her hand against the side of his face and said nothing, because nothing needed saying between them. In the back, the girl leaned forward over the seat. "Daddy," she said, "those men were going to hurt us." "I know," he said. "But you weren't even scared." He thought about it the way he thought about everything she asked him, which was carefully, because he never lied to her. "I was afraid for you," he said, "not of them. There's a difference, and one day you'll know it. Being afraid for someone you love is the thing that makes you steady. It's the fear of the wrong things that makes people fold." He reached back and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I was never going to fold, not with you in this car." She didn't fully understand it that night, but she kept it, long after she'd forgotten the color of the car and the shape of the mountains, that her father never once raised his voice on that road, that 7 men had done all the shouting and none of it had counted for anything, and that the steadiest man she would ever know had been steady precisely because of how much he had to lose. Somewhere behind them, in the last of the light, 7 men stood in the middle of a highway they had ruled for 6 years, finding out what it felt like to be the ones left standing there.